Welcome to Utilising Grounded Theory Research in Education. I am Dr. Susie Dick from Queen Margaret University in Edinburgh. I'm also the lead and the instigator of the Scottish Grounded Theory Network. This presentation today will focus on a number of different areas, but it's predominantly about how grounded theory can be applied in an educational research setting. So through the inductive analysis, that of course is the hallmark of grounded theory, it can give a number of new insights into how a teacher's professional identity can be influenced by conducting research in a classroom setting or indeed higher education. We'll talk through some of the theory behind this, but then moving on to an example from my own research. So the aim of this presentation is that basically by utilising a grounded theory framework when exploring educational issues, it may provide a greater depth of understanding of the experiences of teachers and those involved. So as we all know, this is predominantly what is grounded theory. It's about these patterns, the trends and relationships among the data, but why we use it in education is, again, we have patterns, trends, relationships. That's what education is about. It is, in some ways, you could argue, education is a social experiment with different people and different times, space, places. And it's trying to understand what is happening and why in those spaces that makes grounded theory an ideal methodology to be using for this. So of course there are different types of this, but this is about classic grounded theory at this point in time. So again, looking at how Glaser undertook this and why you would use a classic grounded theory methodology within education, particularly around issues to do with making sure that it is an authentic voice that we are hearing through it. The grounded theory research, though, don't change really. So it's about the processes, the coding, the memo writing, the theoretical sampling, and the saturation of the data. And it's leading to that theory building. What is that theory for that place, that space, those people, and time with this? And again, you know, the strategies for thinking like grounded theorists is, if we look at this through an educational context then, so what is the nature of the reality that is presenting itself in your classroom? What do you actually believe about that reality? Have you ever taken that time just to step back and to think about it? What is it that you value in your education? And we'll talk a little bit more later about theoretical lenses, but also your positionality in this. What is it you value and what is it that your class values? How do we enable self-efficacy among those in our classroom, amongst other teachers or educationalists, if we're not understanding or taking the time to understand the different values at play? And therefore, how do we then interpret what it is that we are seeing and understanding? How do we make sense of it? And where do we actually think ourselves where that knowledge comes from? And how does that then affect our own ability to enact certain pedagogical or andragogical practices that are required to attain particular educational goals? So as I said, what is your worldview? What are your lenses? And this is all reflecting your history, what you've read, what you've seen, what you've understood. And ultimately why we choose to research something in education, and usually it is as a result of an itch or something that we just don't really understand, and we want to understand it better. And in some ways we promote, particularly here in Scotland, about practitioner inquiry, is if there's something going on, go and find out why that is. But of course grounded theory is actually saying, right, rather than go and look at the existing theories, the existing research, actually take the time to understand what's going on from the people involved or the situation itself. And so we use this in a diverse range of research designs, and it doesn't really matter whether we're using this in education, in nursing, and criminology, and understanding global development. We're all looking at this in the same way, so being guided by our choice and application by the aim of our studies. So grounded theory is there to support us in our understanding and how we go about doing something, and how we plan to use each of our selected methods, and making sure that we understand the principles behind what we're doing to enact each of these methods that we are using, before we then go into our types of analysis of the information that we have gained. So starting with the data, the people in front of us, their experiences, what we're observing, what we're seeing, what the conclusions, and understanding why you are inferring those particular conclusions from what you're seeing, and how your positionality, and I'm always going to come back to this positionality because it's absolutely central to how we understand it, to our data, and what we tend to do. So again, this being inductive, this interpretive, how are we interpreting what we are seeing in front of us? So how do we do this in examples? So I'm giving you an example from my own research. So in Scotland, our newly qualified teachers, they automatically get a job for the year, and they're called probationers here, and newly qualified teachers. And they're placed in one local authority. So Scotland is split into 32 local authority areas. We do have some private schools, but not many in Scotland. So most people will go to a local authority school. And you can be placed, you can put in a bid to be in certain local authority areas, but really you can be placed anywhere. And also we have two national languages in Scotland, the Gaelic and English. And Gaelic tends to be more in the West and the Western Isles area, and including this local authority, Argyll and Bute. So this educational research was done on the grounded theory to understand how these new teachers were getting on in their first year of this. Now, what they have to do in Scotland is a practitioner inquiry, and they have to do it. And this is where this research actually came from, is to be able to understand how we could use grounded theory to actually understand what they thought about the practitioner inquiry. There's a lot of research about how wonderful it is, but no one had ever taken the time to actually ask the probationers what they thought without a prior agenda to get them to say, oh, it's wonderful. And it turned out it wasn't quite as wonderful as we thought. So therefore then you use themes around the focus groups and the interviews with prompts. And again, it's usually making the time not to ask direct questions. Do you think this or do you think that? But actually allowing them the space and time to talk. And utilising more of the ideas behind grounded theory in terms of how you would interpret this, about emerging coding and the emerging categories. Or in this case, I used the Garoons. So when I went through the transcripts, from the interviews and the focus group, that it was all about teaching and worrying, the learning, depending, the evolving, the building, the time consuming. And this was beginning to build a picture. And of course, memoing throughout. So it's absolutely central to grounded theory. And I've put Glaser's quote at the bottom explaining from this point of view, it's actually this core stage that we are theorising, the writing up of ideas, and also making sure that we actually go back and look at the ideas and the codes, and understanding the relationships. What is it we're thinking at each space and time? And again, in education, and yes, you could argue in every other research edit, but there's an awful lot going on in time. If you just think about one classroom, how much is going on in that classroom that you need to try and understand, to get your head round, to think about and to interpret through which lens you are interpreting. And of course then, we come up with the evolving ideas of the codes and the categories, the themes, to get to an end point. And I did a pre and post inquiry. But I want to talk about this slide in particular, about worrying. And this to me was absolutely central to why I did grounded theory, and this emerged at the end. Because what I discovered is then I thought I was going in to actually find out more about practitioner inquiry. Was this a great idea, good idea? What might be some of the opportunities and barriers by it? And what I actually discovered was something completely and utterly different. What I discovered is our newly qualified teachers forget practitioner inquiry. They couldn't care less about that, because they spent their whole year in a sort of vague, worrying panic mode, and they were worrying about everything, from not to worry about everything, from to how well the other teachers use to do with results if they were in the high school, to getting a job, that there was expectations that they were going to be have expertise. And the emergent themes were about evolving self and identity and self-efficacy, but with this underlying layer of panic. Now, if I hadn't utilised grounded theory to do this, the chances are this would never have come out so persuasively through it, and also then raises a massive question, and then a question for further research as to what are we actually doing to support. I'm not a big fan of the term resilient. I don't think we really have the right to tell anyone they're not resilient enough. It could be perceived as quite offensive, but what are we doing to help them cope with the social dynamics? And again, that was just absolutely key for me that came out through this. So, bearing in mind what I have talked about, how are you going to start for yours in educational research or in other research areas? So, it's just making sure that the background is justifying the need. You know, I could be accused that I love grounded theory, so therefore I'm automatically going to go to grounded theory, but I've got to be aware that there are other totally valid research methodologies as well. But it's also having a clear and focused, you have to know not necessarily what you're going to get out of it, but really for yourself, why do you want to go for this? What is this itch, this niggle? What is known, what is not known? And it be the gap in the evidence base. Now, of course, this is classic grounded theory, so we're aiming not to go out and do a massive amount of research. We're trying to reduce that bias from all the research that has gone before. But there should be, you know, that niggle that is maybe just the gap in your own understanding. And as grounded theory, the best way to actually go and find that gap for that place, that space, that time that you're doing that. And then having your timeline for the research. There's lots of ways to gather data, and even if we go back to whether it's higher education or education in the classroom, there's data absolutely everywhere. What is it you're going to do? Where's the data generation, the collection, the methods of analysis? Which bit of all this information are you going to take in? And that comes back to why you're choosing to do what you're doing within educational research. And of course, there are some existing materials that you will not be able to get away from, but you have to decide how much attention you need to pay for that before you begin. And ideally what we're wanting is that you don't until you come to the end of this, to actually then go back and say, right, okay, this is what I've discovered. All right, where does this fit with the literature? What's the literature saying about this, the documents, the social media? And I found with my research that some aspects of this had already been highlighted in literature, and that's absolutely okay. But what it showed me is that some of it had been highlighted back into the 1960s, the 70s, the 80s. And I was like, okay, so we already knew this. So why is it still going on here and now? So that was again another direction, another bit for future research. And of course we have to take account of social media these days, but also what's been elicited from the participants. And I particularly like photographs and videos within grounded theory, because again it allows you to see the nuances. And sometimes I wish I'd go back to some of my data from my research, and I will do at some point, and look at the implications of how they have said things. And just thinking back to the intuition, even one instance, a teacher was talking to me in English, a child came in, it switched into Gaelic, and then back to English again. And that, of course, then raises other questions about the research and the time and place that she was operating in. Now, there are lots of sources, particularly around Glacier. So obviously if you go back and look at the PowerPoint, I have taken the time just to give some of the key resources from the different grounded theorists. But again, we're focusing on the classic grounded theory, so this is Glacier. And again, there are current networks, and here are just some of the ones from, I'd like to use the word Twitter, but I believe it's now X, for you to, again, to go and have a look at. And of course, far beyond Scotland, and again, working together on this. So I hope this has been of some help about utilising grounded theory in educational research. And it does have its time and place in many things, but again, it's always going back to what is it that you're looking for, and is this most appropriate methodology? How is it that we're going to demonstrate a critical engagement or support critical engagement in teaching to provide new insights into teachers' professional identity, and how even if teachers are conducting this research in their own classroom in a small scale, then grounded theory is certainly a valid way to do this. Thank you very much.